What if I told you that the very words you whisper in prayer might be the chains holding your blessing back? Not because God ignores you, but because your own imagination keeps repeating one hidden message: I don't have it yet. Neville Goddard revealed that the wrong way to pray is the reason most people wait a lifetime without answers, and the shocking part is, they never realize they're doing it. They told you prayer was the key, and in a way it is. But what if the very way you've been praying is the reason nothing has changed? What if your devotion, your words, your nightly pleas are secretly creating more distance between you and the life you long for? Neville Goddard exposed a truth most people never dare to question. The wrong way to pray is not harmless. It's the hidden resistance blocking manifestation. You see, every time you beg, plead, or repeat the same request, your subconscious doesn't hear faith, it hears lack. And because imagination creates reality, the inner message of "I don't have it yet" becomes the outer proof. That's why so many stay stuck, convinced God is silent, when in fact, their own prayer has been an echo of absence. But there is another way. Neville's teachings reveal that true prayer isn't asking, it's assuming. It's the law of assumption in action. You step into the state where the desire is already fulfilled, and you rest there. No resistance, no desperation, just the quiet power of thanksgiving. And once you feel it real, reality has no choice but to mirror it. Today we're going to uncover why most people unknowingly block their own answers, and how you can shift from begging to creating. By the end of this, you'll see prayer in a way you never have before, and once you do, you'll never go back. It's curious how so many people bow their heads at night, whisper their deepest desires, and yet wake up the next morning with the same emptiness. What they rarely notice is that the prayer itself carries a hidden manifestation block. The words may sound full of faith, but the tone behind them quietly reveals doubt. That distance between what is said and what is felt is exactly where resistance in prayer hides, silent but powerful. Think about it. Someone might say, "God, please bring me abundance." Beautiful words, right? But underneath lies a secret message. I don't have it yet. It's like watering a plant, while at the same time pulling out its roots. Neville Goddard constantly warned about this paradox. The wrong way to pray is never about the words alone. It's about the state they spring from. It's like knocking louder and louder on a door that was never locked in the first place. The law of assumption doesn't respond to noise or repetition, but to the state of being you embody. While the lips repeat, "Please, please," the subconscious only registers absence. This hidden resistance creates delay, frustration, and the endless cycle of not yet. Anyone who has prayed daily for love knows this deeply. Repetition doesn't bring closeness, it reinforces distance. Each plea is heard by the subconscious as evidence that loneliness remains. This is the prayer versus begging dilemma Neville explained. Repeated requests don't invite fulfillment. They multiply the sense of lack. The irony is that prayer is meant to be power, not proof of despair. Yet for many, it becomes the stage where hidden resistance performs. They believe they're moving toward spiritual awakening, when in truth they're just circling the desert of absence. It's not that God ignores them. It's that imagination creates reality, and imagination filled with lack can only reproduce lack. Sometimes it's not even the words themselves, but the emotion dripping from them. Haven't you noticed when a friend says, "I'm fine," and yet you feel they're not? Prayer works the same way. You can speak words of gratitude, but if the heart vibrates with doubt, the true message is scarcity. That subtle contradiction is where resistance hides. Neville Goddard was clear. Every prayer is answered, but not according to words, according to feeling. Feeling is the secret, he reminded. The wrong way to pray is to disguise desperation as devotion. Sweet words on the outside, inner restlessness within. It's like driving with the brakes on. The car moves, yes, but painfully slow, dragging every mile. That's what happens when someone prays in contradiction. It feels like progress, but the weight of lack makes the journey heavy. Conscious creation becomes exhausting when the inner state clings to absence. And then the tragedy unfolds. Many blame God, fate, or even themselves for not being worthy. They miss the real cause. The inner world is divided. One part desires, the other insists, "I don't have it." This conflict generates the sensation of waiting forever. The law of assumption doesn't answer hope, it answers being. So the paradox continues. The more they pray the wrong way, the further away the answer feels. Because prayer born from absence is in truth begging, and begging only strengthens separation, even when dressed in faith. The unseen resistance is not out there, It's the quiet voice inside whispering, "I don't have it yet." But Neville revealed another way. Most people think of prayer as pleading with God, hoping that one day their words will convince him to move. But Neville Goddard turned this idea upside down. He insisted that true prayer is not begging at all, it is assuming the wish already fulfilled. In other words, prayer is not about convincing God to act, it's about stepping into the inner world where the desire is already real. When someone prays in the way Neville taught, there's no sense of waiting. The prayer itself is the state of completion. Imagine putting on a new coat. You don't keep asking, "Where's my coat?" once it's on. You wear it, you feel it, and you move through life as if it's naturally yours. That's the essence of the law of assumption. You assume the state, not the absence. Neville often shared that the wrong way to pray is to ask from a place of lack, because all that does is magnify the separation between you and your desire. But the true prayer is thanksgiving, a quiet celebration that what you longed for has already been given. This is why he repeated again and again, imagination creates reality. The outer world only reflects the inner. Think of someone who wants healing. The ordinary way is to plead for the sickness to go away. But Neville would say, embody the state of health now. Feel the relief in your body as if the healing is complete. Let the prayer be a moment of gratitude, not a cry of desperation. Resistance in prayer dissolves when the inner tone shifts from asking to being. Prayer in Neville's teachings is less about words and more about inner experience. It's a shift of identity. Instead of being the one who waits, you become the one who already is. Instead of repeating requests, you step into the reality where the answer has unfolded. And because imagination creates reality, that assumption becomes the seed of manifestation. He would often say that the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the only true form of prayer. Words can be empty, feelings are magnetic. That's why feeling is the secret, is at the heart of every Neville Goddard teaching. The moment you feel it real, you've prayed correctly. Anything else is noise. So when we talk about prayer versus begging, the difference is sharp. Begging looks outward, waiting for something to come. Prayer, in Neville's sense, turns inward, resting in the truth that it is already done. One creates endless waiting, the other creates conscious creation. One affirms absence, the other affirms completion. Neville explained this not as theory, but as practice. He urged people to test it. Try assuming wealth, not by asking for money, but by feeling wealthy when you open your wallet. Try assuming love, not by pleading for a partner, but by sleeping each night in the feeling of being cherished. That shift alone can break years of hidden resistance. The wrong way to pray keeps life in the future tense, someday. The true way of prayer brings it into the present, now, and that now becomes magnetic. Because in the law of assumption, the subconscious doesn't deal with later, it deals only with being. When you assume the wish fulfilled, the subconscious accepts it as fact and begins rearranging your outer world to match. This is the radical truth Neville left us. Prayer is not a request but a recognition. It is not about chasing blessings but wearing them inwardly. And once you feel it real, you've already prayed. What follows is not effort, but unfolding. Yet most people miss this and return to the old way of asking, still unaware of how desperation cancels their words. There's a hidden trap most people fall into without realizing. Every time they repeat the same request, they unknowingly declare, "I still don't have it." This is what Neville Goddard called the prayer of lack. It feels sincere, even faithful, but underneath, it's a constant reminder to the subconscious that the wish is missing. And the subconscious never argues. It simply reflects what it's given. Picture someone praying every night, "God, please help me find a job." At first it feels hopeful, but as days turn into weeks, each repetition carries the same message: "I'm still unemployed." The outer words sound like faith, but the inner world echoes absence. That gap is what creates a manifestation block, reinforcing the very state they long to escape. The wrong way to pray is always rooted in this paradox. While the lips may say, "I believe," the emotion whispers, "I lack." And since imagination creates reality, the subconscious captures the feeling, not the phrase. That's why Neville insisted that prayer is not asking, it is assuming. Asking too often is like telling life itself, "I am without." Think about it in everyday terms. If you kept telling a friend, "Don't forget me," day after day, what would they hear? Not reassurance, but fear of being forgotten. The prayer of lack works the same way. Each time it's repeated, It affirms separation instead of connection. It becomes resistance in prayer dressed up as devotion. This is why Neville Goddard's teachings are so radical. He stripped prayer of repetition and desperation. He taught that the only true prayer is the one that assumes the wish fulfilled, once with conviction, and then rests in the state of completion. Begging, on the other hand, is just a louder version of doubt. Many people unknowingly turn prayer into a habit of waiting. They wake up with the same words, go to sleep with the same plea, and wonder why nothing shifts. But the subconscious doesn't record hope. It records being. If the state is still asking, then that is the reality reflected. And so they remain stuck in a loop, mistaking persistence in words for persistence in faith. It's like standing at a bus stop, but never boarding the bus, just asking the driver over and over, "Can I get a ride?" The ride was always available, but the refusal to step on board keeps the person stranded. The prayer of lack does the same. It keeps the answer just out of reach by affirming its absence. What's even trickier is that this kind of prayer feels noble. People say, "I've been praying for years," but time itself exposes the flaw. True prayer doesn't stretch over decades. It shifts identity in a moment. Neville taught that persistence is not repeating words, but persisting in the state of fulfillment. That is conscious creation. So when someone continues asking, they're not moving closer to God's answer. They're moving deeper into separation. The prayer of lack keeps the heart restless, the mind waiting, and the outer world mirroring, "Not yet." It's not rejection, it's reflection. The inner world simply insists, "I don't have it," and reality agrees. This is the quiet tragedy Neville tried to expose. People think they're praying, but they're really affirming emptiness, and as long as the subconscious hears lack, the answer cannot appear. The way out begins when prayer shifts from asking to gratitude, from hoping to being. But most miss this shift and instead slip into desperation, often without realizing it. Desperation is tricky because it hides behind polite words. Someone may say, "God, I trust you," yet their tone trembles with fear. That trembling is the true prayer, not the sentence. Neville Goddard often pointed out that resistance in prayer isn't always loud. It can be the quiet desperation woven into the way we ask. The subconscious catches it instantly. It's like telling a child, "Don't worry, everything's fine," while your voice shakes and your eyes reveal panic. The child doesn't believe the words. They believe the vibration. The same happens with prayer. Even when people say the right things, the inner world might still be affirming separation, and that hidden desperation becomes a manifestation block. The wrong way to pray, then, isn't just about asking. It's about asking with that anxious undertone, words of faith but feelings of fear. This subtle conflict is what keeps people stuck, because the law of assumption doesn't listen to the lips, it listens to the state of being. And a state of desperation can only reproduce more waiting. Neville's teachings on this are simple but not easy. You cannot fake inner peace. You can repeat gratitude phrases, but if your heart is racing with worry, the subconscious hears lack. It's not judging you, it's just reflecting you. And so the prayer versus begging difference shows itself clearly. One is calm possession, the other is restless pleading. This subtle desperation also shows up in timing. People pray, then peek outside looking for immediate evidence. If nothing changes in a day, they pray harder, louder, longer. But each repetition shouts, "I still don't have it." That tone, even if hidden, is resistance. It cancels the very wish they hoped to manifest. Think of it like tuning a radio. Even if you know the right frequency, a tiny bit of static ruins the sound. Desperation is that static. It doesn't matter how many times you repeat the words. If the frequency is distorted, the message doesn't land. Conscious creation requires a clean signal, gratitude, peace, and the power of assumption. One of Neville Goddard's most powerful insights was that imagination creates reality, not effort. Desperation is effort without faith. It's trying to force a door open that already swings freely. That's why hidden resistance often feels exhausting. It's the energy of pushing against your own imagination. People sometimes mistake desperation for intensity. They think if they pray harder, God will listen more. But God, or the subconscious, doesn't respond to volume, it responds to feeling. And the feeling of desperation is separation. It says, "I am still apart from what I desire." And so reality mirrors that division. The key is subtle. When prayer is real, it feels calm, inevitable, like the exhale after holding your breath. When it's desperation, it feels restless, urgent, anxious. This inner tone is what Neville wanted people to notice, because only when you see it can you shift it, and that shift changes everything. So the lesson becomes clear. The subconscious doesn't need your panic, it needs your peace. It doesn't need repeated begging, it needs felt fulfillment. Once you notice the subtle tone of desperation, you can begin to replace it with inner celebration, and that opens the door to the true posture of prayer. If the wrong way to pray is rooted in lack and desperation, Neville Goddard showed us the opposite. The true posture of prayer is thanksgiving, not pleading, not waiting, but quietly celebrating that the wish is already fulfilled. Prayer in its purest form is not about asking, it's about being. It's stepping into the inner world where what you desire already exists and resting there. Imagine someone who longs for financial freedom. Instead of begging, "God, please remove these debts," Neville would guide them to sit quietly, close their eyes, and feel the relief of freedom, to let the body relax as if the bills were paid, to whisper, "Thank you," as if abundance had already arrived. That's conscious creation. That's the power of assumption in action. The true posture of prayer is more like wearing a crown than asking for one. When you wear it, you don't need to remind yourself. It's already on your head. You walk differently, you move differently, you speak differently. This is what Neville meant when he said to assume the wish fulfilled. Prayer becomes identity, not repetition. And the beauty of this posture is its calmness. There's no rush, no tension, no checking the outer world for confirmation. Instead, there's peace. A quiet knowing that the inner scene has already been created, and that imagination creates reality. This inner calm is not laziness, it's alignment. It's the opposite of hidden resistance. Neville often described prayer as thanksgiving. To him, gratitude wasn't a tool to attract. It was the natural expression of already having. That's why feeling is the secret. When gratitude rises naturally, you know you're aligned. When you're forcing gratitude while still doubting, that's resistance in disguise. Think of it like celebrating a birthday. You don't spend the whole day asking, "Will my cake come? Will my gifts arrive?" No. You live the day with the assumption it's already yours. The laughter, the smiles, the joy flow from a certainty. That's the posture of prayer Neville taught. To feel the end as real and live from it. This is not about pretending. It's not about faking it till you make it. Pretending still carries the undertone of lack. The true posture is natural, effortless, inevitable. It's like slipping into shoes that fit perfectly. You don't question if they're yours, you just walk. Prayer should feel the same way. And here's the surprising part. This posture doesn't require long hours or dramatic rituals. Sometimes the most powerful prayer is a few seconds of genuine feeling. A single imaginal act, deeply accepted, outweighs months of begging. Because the subconscious doesn't count time, it responds only to intensity of being. The true posture of prayer then is thanksgiving without effort, peace without proof, joy without condition. It's the inner exhale that says, "It is done." And from that state, the outer world inevitably rearranges itself to match. That's the law of assumption. That's the essence of Neville Goddard teachings. And once someone discovers this posture, they never go back to begging. They begin to see prayer not as a struggle but as creation, not as waiting but as receiving. And it's in this place of alignment that the secret becomes clear. To pray is to feel, and to feel is to create. Which brings us to the next key, how feeling itself becomes the alignment that makes everything real. Neville Goddard repeated it so often that it almost became a mantra. Feeling is the secret. He meant that the true alignment in prayer doesn't come from words, rituals, or even the length of devotion. It comes from the felt experience of already having. Words can deceive, but feeling never lies. The subconscious accepts what you feel as fact, and reality responds accordingly. Think of it like tasting a fruit in your imagination. You don't need to hold the apple in your hand to feel the crunch, the sweetness, the juice. The sensation itself is enough to convince the body it's real. Prayer works the same way. When you feel the wish fulfilled, you step into alignment with it. That alignment is creation, not request. The challenge for most people is that they confuse thinking with feeling. They repeat affirmations, hoping the words will eventually sink in, but the vibration behind them is still lack. Saying, "I am rich," while secretly trembling at bills, is resistance in prayer. It's the wrong way to pray. True alignment happens only when the feeling of wealth replaces the fear. Neville explained that the inner world is where everything begins. You don't wait for the outer to change first. You assume it inwardly, and once the feeling becomes natural, the outer must mirror it. Imagination creates reality, but only when the imaginal scene is felt as real. Without feeling, imagination is just daydreaming. With feeling, it becomes conscious creation. This is why hidden resistance is so dangerous. A person may think they're aligned because they've said the right words, but if anxiety, doubt, or desperation still linger, the feeling betrays them. The subconscious listens only to the emotion beneath the words. That's why Neville insisted on sinking into the sensation of already being the person you want to be. Imagine lying down at night and letting yourself feel the relief of having what you asked for. No questions, no begging, just a soft smile of fulfillment. That inner celebration carries more power than hours of pleading, because alignment isn't about repetition, it's about intensity and acceptance. Once the feeling is real, the prayer is complete. You could say that prayer is like tuning into a frequency. If you want to hear jazz, you don't stay on a rock station. You tune until the sound comes through clearly. Feeling is that frequency. If the feeling is lack, you'll hear lack. If the feeling is fulfillment, you'll hear abundance. The power of assumption lies in staying tuned to the right station. Neville Goddard teachings remind us that the body itself becomes the temple of alignment. When you feel the end as real, your breathing slows, your shoulders relax, your mind grows quiet. That shift is the signal. The prayer has landed. Anything else, tension, checking, doubting, is just proof that resistance is still at work. And here's the liberating part. You don't need to force it. The more you try, the more you signal you don't have it. Alignment is natural. It's slipping into the state as if it were always yours. That's why Neville encouraged short, imaginal acts, felt deeply, rather than endless rituals. Once the feeling is alive, it carries itself. So the question is never, did I say it right? But, did I feel it real? That's the measure of true prayer. And when you live from that place, your inner world changes first. Peace replaces panic. Joy replaces doubt. And soon the outer follows, because it has no choice. From here, the practice becomes simple, learning to turn prayer itself into assumption. Neville Goddard was never satisfied with leaving ideas in the abstract. He always gave people a way to practice, to test the law of assumption in daily life. One of his most practical teachings was this: instead of asking for what you want, create a short imaginal scene that implies the wish is already fulfilled, and then feel it real. That simple shift turns prayer into assumption. Imagine wanting a new job. The ordinary way is to pray, "Please let me find one soon." But Neville's way is different. Close your eyes and picture a friend congratulating you. Hear their voice saying, "I knew you'd get it." Feel the handshake, see the smile, sense the relief in your body. That's the real prayer. Not asking, but receiving in imagination. This technique works because the subconscious doesn't distinguish between what's real and what's vividly felt. The body reacts as though the experience has already happened, and since imagination creates reality, that inner acceptance plants the seed. Words alone can't do this, but feeling the scene does. That's why Neville insisted, assume the wish fulfilled. Prayer versus begging becomes obvious here. Begging keeps saying, "It's not mine yet." Assumption silently declares, "It's done." One keeps you outside the promise, the other puts you inside it. And once you're inside, the subconscious begins rearranging circumstances to match. That is conscious creation at its purest. The beauty of Neville's method is its simplicity. He didn't ask people to spend hours in ritual. Sometimes a single scene lasting just a few seconds, repeated nightly, is enough. The key is intensity, not duration. If you can feel the relief, the joy, the thanksgiving as real, the subconscious takes it as fact, and reality begins to shift. Think of it like rehearsing for a play. An actor doesn't just memorize lines, they embody the character until it feels natural. Neville's prayer technique is the same. You don't just say the words of gratitude, you become the person who has already received. Once it feels natural, the outer world has no choice but to follow. He often suggested using sleep as a gateway. Before drifting off, create a scene that implies fulfillment. It could be as simple as someone hugging you and saying, "I'm so happy for you." As you fall asleep with that feeling, the subconscious is most open to suggestion. This is how prayer transforms into assumption. And the beauty is it can be applied to anything: health, relationships, finances, spiritual awakening. The details of the scene don't matter as much as the feeling it generates. If the scene implies fulfillment and you feel it real, the law of assumption is activated. Resistance in prayer melts away because there's no asking, only being. Many people resist this at first, thinking it's too simple, but that's the point. The hidden resistance thrives on complication, on effort, on striving. Neville stripped it down to the essence, feeling. If you can feel it done, you've prayed. If you keep asking, you're still outside. And so the technique becomes a doorway. Instead of waiting for proof, you create proof inwardly. Instead of praying with words, you pray with imagination. Instead of begging, you assume. And when you learn to live this way, you stop waiting for miracles and start creating them. The signs of true prayer, calm, peace, inevitability, begin to show themselves. One of the biggest questions people have is, how do I know if I've really prayed the right way? Neville Goddard's answer was always simple. Look at how you feel afterward. The signs of true prayer are not outer proofs but inner shifts. If your heart feels lighter, calmer and certain, you've touched the state of the wish fulfilled. If you feel anxious or restless, resistance is still at work. Inner calm is the first indicator. When you pray correctly, through assumption rather than begging, you no longer feel the need to check, to peek, to worry. There's a natural quietness, almost like exhaling after holding your breath. That sense of peace is the subconscious signaling, it is done. Another sign is inevitability. Instead of asking, will it happen? There's a subtle knowing. Of course it will. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. Just as when you plant a seed, you don't doubt whether it will sprout, you simply expect it. That calm expectation is the vibration of fulfillment, not lack. Joy is another unmistakable sign. True prayer leaves behind a feeling of inner celebration, even if nothing outside has shifted yet. It's like carrying a secret smile that no one else understands. This joy doesn't come from evidence. It comes from the power of assumption. You already feel it done, so your body responds with gratitude. And then there's the absence of urgency. When prayer is free of resistance, you no longer rush or force. You don't beg God to hurry. Instead, you rest. This resting is not passivity, it's faith in action. It's the ultimate sign that the inner world has aligned and that imagination has accepted the new state as reality. Neville Goddard teachings emphasize that resistance in prayer always shows itself as tension. When you feel the need to repeat endlessly, to push, to demand, you're still in separation. But when you can thank silently, smile inwardly, and move on with peace, you've shifted. That's the prayer that creates. One practical test Neville suggested: after your prayer, could you walk away and never mention it again and still know it's done? If yes, you've aligned. If no, you're still holding resistance. Because true prayer doesn't demand reinforcement, it sustains itself. The inner world has already locked into the state. Another clear sign is when doubt loses its bite. The old voice that used to say, "What if it doesn't work?" suddenly feels weak, almost irrelevant. You hear it, but it doesn't shake you. That's alignment. You've stepped into a higher state where fulfillment feels more real than lack. And perhaps the most beautiful sign, gratitude arises naturally. You don't force it, you don't script it. It flows. You feel thankful as if the answer has already arrived, because in your inner world, it has. That gratitude is both the proof and the fuel of conscious creation. When these signs are present, peace, inevitability, joy, rest, gratitude, you know your prayer is free of resistance. From that place, persistence becomes effortless. You no longer push for change. You simply remain in the state of fulfillment. And it's in persisting with this inner tone of gratitude and certainty that the real transformation happens. Neville Goddard often said that the real work isn't in creating the state once, it's in persisting in it. Anyone can close their eyes for a few minutes and feel the wish fulfilled. But the challenge comes when the outer world seems unchanged. That's when most people slip back into begging. Persistence means holding the inner tone of fulfillment, no matter what appears outside. Think of it like planting a seed. You don't dig it up every morning to check if it's growing. You trust the process. You water, you nurture, but you never question whether life is at work beneath the soil. Persisting in fulfilled prayer is the same. Once the seed of assumption is planted, your only task is to rest in gratitude, knowing it's inevitable. This persistence is not about effort, it's about refusal. Refusing to return to lack, refusing to let doubt steal the feeling. Every time you choose to dwell in gratitude instead of anxiety, you are persisting. Neville called this living in the end. It's a quiet firmness, not a struggle. Many confuse persistence with repetition. They think they must pray over and over until something happens. But that's the wrong way to pray. True persistence is not repeating words, but repeating states. It's not about asking again, it's about returning again and again to the inner feeling of already done. Persistence often feels like remembering. You catch yourself slipping into fear and gently return to fulfillment. You hear your mind whisper, but it's not here yet, and you answer, it is done. This practice is simple but powerful. Over time, the inner world stabilizes and the outer world must follow. Neville's students often asked, but what if nothing changes outside? His answer was clear, keep the faith. Conscious creation is not about reacting to appearances but shaping them. The outer is always slower than the inner. Persistence means trusting the law of assumption enough to stay with it, even when proof hasn't arrived yet. Think of an actor preparing for a role. They don't drop the character every time they leave rehearsal. They carry it, live it, breathe it until it becomes second nature. Persistence in prayer works the same way. You live as the one who has, not the one who waits. That consistency shapes identity, and identity shapes reality. Of course, resistance in prayer will try to creep back in. Old habits of worry, impatience, or despair will knock at the door. But persistence doesn't mean you never doubt. It means you don't stay there. You shift back into gratitude, even if it's for a few seconds. That shift is victory. Neville Goddard teachings emphasize that persistence is what turns an imaginal act into a lived reality. A single spark of assumption may plant the seed, but persistence waters it. Without persistence, the seed dies of neglect. With persistence, the harvest becomes inevitable. And so persistence becomes the secret bridge between inner creation and outer manifestation. Not begging, not forcing, but holding. And when you learn to persist in the fulfilled state, prayer ceases to feel like waiting. It becomes resting. And from that resting comes the final realization. Prayer was never about asking at all, but about creating. Neville Goddard shattered one of the deepest assumptions about prayer, that it is asking God to intervene. He taught instead that prayer is creation. It's not a request sent upward, but a recognition planted inward. To pray is not to convince God. It's to align yourself with the finished work, to assume the wish fulfilled and let imagination create reality. This is why the wrong way to pray feels endless. Requests keep the answer in the future. Someday, maybe. But true prayer is present. It declares, now. And once you live in the now of fulfillment, your subconscious accepts it as fact. That acceptance is creation. You don't wait for life to shift. You let life mirror what you've already become. Prayer as creation means seeing yourself differently. Instead of being the seeker, you become the one who has found. Instead of being the beggar, you are the possessor. Neville Goddard called this the law of assumption. Assume the state, and it hardens into fact. Prayer is not about waiting for proof, it's about carrying proof within. Think about electricity. You don't beg the light bulb to turn on. You flip the switch and the current flows. Prayer works the same way. Asking is like standing in the dark, hoping light will come. Creation is flipping the switch inside, aligning with the state, and the outer world illuminates accordingly. This perspective dissolves the old struggle of prayer versus begging. Begging looks outward and reinforces separation. Creation turns inward and affirms union. One breeds resistance in prayer, the other dissolves it. When you pray as creation, there's no desperation, no hidden resistance. There's only thanksgiving because in your inner world it is done. Neville often said, you are already what you want to be. Prayer, then, is simply accepting that truth. Not tomorrow, not someday, but now. The hidden resistance disappears because you no longer see the desire as distant. You wear it like clothing, breathe it like air, carry it as identity. That's why feeling is the secret. It fuses you with the state of fulfillment, and this changes everything. Prayer is no longer a ritual. It becomes a way of living. Every imaginal act is prayer. Every assumption is prayer. Every moment you return to gratitude, to certainty, to fulfillment, you are praying, and reality must bend to match. This is what Neville meant by spiritual awakening. The realization that prayer was never about moving God, it was about moving yourself. God acts through your imagination, through your assumption, through your inner world. To pray is to create, and to create is to remember who you are. When you embrace prayer as creation, you stop waiting for life to deliver. You become the deliverer. You rest in thanksgiving, you celebrate inwardly, you persist in the state of completion. And little by little, the outer world begins to mirror what was already alive within. So prayer ceases to be a request and becomes the ultimate act of conscious creation. It is the quiet knowing, it is done. And from that knowing, the world reshapes itself. That's the final truth Neville Goddard left us. Prayer is not asking for the miracle, it is being the miracle. So now the question isn't whether your prayer will be answered. The question is, what state are you praying from? Are you still asking, hoping, begging? Or are you assuming, feeling, and resting in fulfillment? Neville Goddard made it clear. The universe is not ignoring you, it's reflecting you. And if your inner world whispers lack, the outer world will echo it back. But when you shift, when you let go of desperation and enter the calm gratitude of it is done, something changes. The resistance fades. The waiting ends. You stop knocking at the door and realize it was open all along. That's the true posture of prayer. Not separation, but union. Not request, but creation. So I'll leave you with this. Next time you pray, notice your tone. Notice your feeling. Are you pushing or are you resting? Because your answer is hidden right there. And if this message sparks something in you, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because this is just the beginning. Together, we're going to keep uncovering the deeper layers of Neville Goddard's teachings so you can stop waiting for miracles and start creating them.